Welcome. What you're beginning to see here is a little magic behind the magic as I get the slideshow running. So thank you for your patience. My name is Joshua Estrin, and this is my presentation. I hope that by adding a bit of audio to it, it makes it um, a bit more dynamic. We'll be looking at the micro, mezzo, and macro impact of group dynamics on positive outcomes in a practicum setting. And this is a bit of housekeeping. If you're listening to this, you've already clicked the audio link, so congratulations. There is also a traditional PowerPoint file for your review on the discussion board. You can download it, you can open it. It's yours to use and abuse, as they see it, as they say. I would ask that you post as quickly and as early as possible after reviewing this presentation. It gives us more time against the backdrop of what's understandably a somewhat static online platform to engage as much as possible, because it's not just about hearing or reading your answers in this case to my questions, but having the opportunity to ask you questions and gaining greater insight into what you are experiencing. I think that's where the real power and at least where the real excitement is for me. So thanks in advance, and we'll move on. As an overview, again, the purpose of this presentation was to examine the impact of micro, meso, and macro level forces on my own personal practicum setting and explore it by introducing theory as well as practice and looking at parallels and comparables. We've heard those words in research over and over again. What is it about my practicum setting and my challenges that we can make universal to perhaps yours and generalize to the point of perhaps in some areas practicum here at Nova in general? My presentation goals mirror in many ways the overview. It's a highlight of the impact of micro, meso, and macro level dynamics to discuss both theory and practice. I think that theory and practice are that chicken egg, egg chicken conundrum, and they're both extremely important. When we can marry theory and practice, I think the real power begins to happen in what we're doing. And whether you feel you've clocked your hours in this profession or you feel as if you're emerging in this area, in this profession, I think it's important that we don't forget that we need a strong sense of theory and theoretical constructs, but we can't forget the real time on the ground experiences that should in fact support and influence theory and vice versa. That being said, my site is a 70-year-old construction management and safety management firm, and it's involved in construction forensics. When buildings fall down and people get hurt, the firm looks at things from an engineering, from a legal, and from a behavioral standpoint. I tend to focus, you see the list here, on behavioral safety analysis and, of course, conflict analysis and resolution services. I've included my attempts at looking at the flow of responsibility. Clearly, the CEO is the end all and be all. This is a top down approach to management, and you might notice that the CEO also has my last name. One of the added intricacies of my practicum setting not only is the fact that I've been there from practicum 1 to practicum 2, but I've been there for the last decade, and it's also 7 decades. It is a family business. I am the seventh decade. You can see here that it's a rather large firm. We have about 100 employees, plus interns, plus independent contractors. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring to your attention that, yes, you will see some people here that I share genetics with. So the workplace involves the interaction and reaction of multiple systems working simultaneously. For any of you who have studied psychology, sociology, social work, sometimes they call it the pie theory, person in the environment. But obviously, the environment and those who make up the environment cannot work in a vacuum, and there's constant interaction. So, in terms of what I'd like to look at here, I'd like to look at it specifically against the backdrop of social cognitive theory by providing a framework for understanding, predicting, and what's most exciting for me, the potential to change human behavior. So we have to look at human factors, we have to look at biology, we have to look at human behavior, and we also understandably have to look at the environment. In this model, the interaction between the person and behavior involves thoughts, actions, human beliefs, cognitive competencies, and of course, the environment. This gives you a very simplistic view of what Bandura, the founder or one of the founders of this theory believed, with P being the person, B representing behavior, and E representing the environment. We see, at least theoretically, if not practically, a flow of information and energy should be flowing through very permeable barriers. It may not be happening that way. It didn't happen at my setting always that way, and it may not be happening at your practicum. But again, sometimes theory and practice differ, and I think that by exploring these potential differences or similarities, we can gain a great deal of insight. So, what were the challenges at my site? Well, as I mentioned before, I was part of the system but taking on a new role. I was the behavior guy, yet part of my practicum objectives and my tasks were to interact with systems that I usually didn't interact with, like the IT department. I was tasked to bring together the different systems, legal, engineering, the physics department interns, and begin to create on a digital highway some semblance of a database so that we not only could pull information more effectively and efficiently, but begin to see where some of our research time was overlapping and we could actually be supportive and beneficial to one another. But my new role challenged thoughts, actions, human beliefs, cognitive competencies, and environment, e.g., the status quo that we hear so much about. So I'd like to take a brief moment to look at that. The way in which it challenged thoughts was that people had questions, and those questions needed to be addressed. And at a macro and mezzo level, most specifically, because it was the micro level questions, our workers, they needed to understand what was being done, what was being changed, what my role was, because as we all probably know, it's human behavior for all of us in the absence of data, of information, to sometimes fill in the blanks. And oftentimes we fill in the blanks with what's not the truth. I was not doing this to do away with the IT department. I was not doing this to step on any proverbial feet. And once people understood that, it made for a much better setting. They needed to also see that my actions would be beneficial to the entire system, that I wasn't just doing this for myself or for a small group of people. Belief systems, micro, mezzo, and macro, needed to be addressed. And once people understood that this would enhance rather than detract, it would make their job easier and no one was going to lose their job, there was definitely an increase in support. And then cognitive competencies. The entire system, all the systems needed to trust that I could do what I was being tasked to do, that the behavior guy also had an understanding of what was necessary to do in terms of nuts and bolts technology. And of course, the environment needed to be one of collaboration. We hear that word over and over again. And if you take the time to look again at the flow chart of responsible individuals, mezzo, macro, and micro, you'll see that decisions were made and all come together, top-down approach. The CEO makes all the decisions. So something that needed to change was that information, although decision making still stayed top down, information needed to disseminate, needed to go back and forth, bottom up, top down. And people actually needed to be encouraged and rewarded for buying into this belief that they wouldn't be punished for having questions, for having concerns, and for having differing opinions. So in terms of how we generalize this and how we create comparables, what I'd like you to think about, based on what I've shown to you, and understandably 10 minutes is not a great deal of time, are what are the micro, mezzo, and macro level forces in your practicum setting? Are decisions made collaboratively? Do certain groups have what appear to be more influence? And if so, what and who are those groups? And what would you change right now in your setting to allow for more positive outcomes relating to your work? We're in ostensibly the fifth week. There's a great deal of time and energy and work that's going to go into what you're doing at your practicum right now. And so I'd be very interested, because now is the time before everyone becomes entrenched and sees you as only doing one thing as the individual at your setting, to really look at, maybe against the backdrop of the 8 steps that we wrote about and discussed and read in week 4 in the successful internship. What can you do right now? What do you need to do right now? What action steps do you need to take right now, as was discussed in the reading, so that you show up fully prepared to take 100% of your responsibility for what it will take for your practicum to have the most positive outcomes? we're at about time now. I'd like to thank you very much for taking some time out to listen to what it is that I'm doing, and I look forward in just a few weeks to meeting you all in real life and real time, and hearing more about what it is you're doing and what you're looking to achieve. So, thank you very much. And should you want to explore Bandura more, I've included the reference here.